Good morning, and welcome to the Terry Leadership Speaker Series. My name is Mitchell Pearson, and I'm a senior Leonard Leadership Scholar studying finance at the Terry College of Business, and have recently accepted a position at EY, the Financial Services Office in Charlotte, North Carolina. The Institute for Leadership Advancement and the Terry College of Business develops value-based, impact-driven leaders who serve the communities and organizations. ILA instills leadership capabilities layered on top of the student academic major that promote self-development, effective communication, teamwork, innovation, and adaptability in a changing global environment. We are thrilled to have you here this morning to listen and learn from our guest, Karole Lloyd. Ms. Lloyd is the Vice Chair and Southeast Regional Managing Partner for EY. For the past 7 years, she has served as a member of the U.S. Executive Board, America's Operating Executive and Global Practice Group for EY. Ms. Lloyd assumed the Southeast Regional Leadership role in 2009, and since then has transformed the business from predominant audit and tax client basis to a full-scale professional provider of services such as advisory and transaction consulting. In her 35-plus year career, she has served many of EY's highest profile clients. She is currently the Senior Advisory Partner for Delta Airlines, WestRock, and the Coca-Cola Company, and had previously served in this role at Intercontinental Exchange and Johnson & Johnson. Ms. Lloyd formerly served as a coordinating partner for Toronto Dominion Financial Group in Canada, as well as the region's financial corporation located in the Southeast. Ms. Lloyd is active in the Atlanta community, serving on the Board of Trustees and Executive Committee of the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, the United Way of Greater Atlanta, and the Rotary Club of Atlanta. Additionally, she was previously the chair of the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra Board of Directors. Ms. Lloyd and her husband John have 3 sons, a daughter-in-law, and a grandson. Please join me in welcoming her to the Terry Leadership Speaker Series, Karole Lloyd.
Well, hey guys, my name is Eli Yarbrough. I'm a senior Leonard Leadership Scholar here at the University of Georgia, but you guys don't care about me. So to who we're here to talk about right now, Karole, I want you to just kind of touch on, we kind of got your business biography. Tell us a little about the you biography, the personal side of you.
That's fun, Eli. First of all, thank you, and I'm delighted to be in Bulldog Country. And I'm sitting here thinking about this. I think this is really neat. What a great place to have a meeting. So thank you for inviting me. This is a real treat. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been, as you notice, actually 37 years with EY. Grew up in the state just just west of yours, and have been. I have 3 kids. As you say, I'm now really spending a lot of time with a grandson that's 3 years old. And I don't play golf. I absolutely love to play tennis, which I'm going to do one of these days, a lot more of. And I have really just enjoyed, I guess, Eli, as I focus on it. I've really spent my whole life, quite frankly, in that business. I've been in 12 offices in the 37 years. So we'll talk about it, I'm sure, but needless to say, it was interesting because my children didn't always live with me. I lived in one city and they lived in another, and I commuted a lot. So it's a great life, I think. So anyway,
I guess let's take it back a little bit. And now I will say she warned me beforehand. She said this is not a houndstooth jacket; it's a bulldog black and white.
This is a bulldog black and white.
But tell us a little bit about where you were. A city pretty similar to Athens in this state over there. Tell us about that time.
Yeah, I grew up in Tuscaloosa. And that's one of those places where, quite frankly, I remember vividly the conversation with my dad when I started to think about going to colleges. And I'm actually glad I have a son that's a bulldog, okay, who came here, just finished last year. But I grew up in Tuscaloosa, and I remember having the conversation with Dad when I said to him, he said, Connie, you can go to school anywhere in the country you want to go to school. And I said, okay, I'm 18 years old. And he says, but when I write the check, it's going to Alabama. And I went, I think I understand cash flow. So that was my first experience, quite frankly, in understanding I was going to Tuscaloosa to school. So I did live on campus, participated in sororities and actually had a great career at Alabama. Finished in 3 years, by the way. So I'm sitting around here thinking, how many of you in this audience are 20 or 21? Wow. Okay. So that's where I was when I finished and then started with EY.
Yeah, so I'm guessing immediately, right when you went to school, you knew exactly what you're going to be doing at this point in your life?
No. In fact, I was reflecting on that on the way up this morning. When I started school, I was going to be a journalism major, okay? And then all of a sudden, I thought I might go to law school, so I eventually went into accounting. And let me just share with you all, I have a grandmother and a mother that are accountants. And so, no, Eli, it was interesting. I believed that what I was going to do is start my career at that time. Big Four accounting firms were a great place to start. I would tell you, I think all of business is a great place to start. But I started my career really thinking that I was going to spend 2 years, get my CPA certificate, and then my family owned a lumber business, and I was going home to run the lumber company.
Yeah.
And I obviously didn't do that.
Obviously, you did not. Now, I'm also interested here. So that's where you grew up. That's where you're from. That's where you went to school. How did you get involved with the University of Georgia? What are your relationships there? How did that come about?
Eli, I moved to Atlanta in 2009. And I must admit, it's interesting, you all have an alumni by the name of John Schrodenbach. And it's fascinating because John and I came, in fact, I don't think I had been in the role as regional managing partner in the Southeast for 3 weeks before John says, you have to go to Athens. And I'm thinking, okay, I've been to one football game years and years ago in Athens. And so we came to Athens, we sat down and met with your dean, now Ben Ayers. We sat across the table. It's really fascinating because one of the things that I like to do is I like to entertain in my own home. And so I like to throw events, I like to raise money, and we're sitting with Dean Ayers, and John and I are sitting there, and we start talking about a campaign for Georgia, and John volunteers that Carol will just host a party at her house. And I said, this is really interesting because I'd only been here like 3 weeks. But what I realized was the University of Georgia is absolutely critical to EY's recruiting, Eli. Like Mitchell said, we have a lot of opportunity for jobs. The whole profession does. And so I recognize that with the quality of students you're putting out at Georgia, we really needed to get to know Georgia better. So I was delighted that John asked me to do that. My second encounter with Georgia is that I am one of the I guess I'm hoping it's not retired faculty members of the Deer Run Fellows Program. And in 2013, I was invited by one of your alumni, Doug Ivester, to participate in the Deer Run Fellows program at his farm. I don't know how you call it a farm. You call it a plantation, excuse me. He probably will kill me for calling it a farm. But anyway, Doug and Kay invited my husband and I to be faculty at the Deer Run program. And we had 8 of the graduates from Georgia, 4 of the women, okay? India Pinder, if any of you know her, Sarah Carr, Christine Blumfeld, and Callie Wu. And the 4 of them were our people at our home that night. We were their faculty. And it was interesting, Eli, because one of the cool things that I realized was we really got to know them over that weekend. And I will share with you all, it's neat for me right now because we keep a connection with all 4 women. I had dinner with India in Greenville a couple of weeks ago. I've had a glass of wine with Sarah. And it's all about who they are and who they're trying to become. And so I was endeared. And then we get to, of course, my youngest, who I already said, was up at Furman finishing up his college degree. And once I got to Georgia, I realized that you all have a phenomenal business program. But more importantly, what you have is the ability to connect with people who can help make you successful in your career. Mm-hmm. And so, despite the fact that I was obviously my football allegiances and sports allegiances had been someplace else, I truly encourage my son, Mitchell, to come and join the Masters of Accounting program. He's going to work for one of the other accounting firms, started a couple of weeks ago. And so, I will tell you right now, we really are bulldogs at our house. So,
that is good to hear.
That's why I said this is black and white bulldog color, not houndstooth. So.
Now, I do want to go ahead and jump into, we were touching you, giving all of us some advice up here. If you were to go back to yourself when you were at Alabama, 20-year-old Karole, what would you say after your successes, after 12 positions, countless roles? Well, looking back, if you could go back and talk to yourself, and as you kind of talk to all of us today as in that same position as you, what would you want to touch on? What would you highlight? What would you tell yourself?
You know, it's interesting, Eli. The first thing I think I would say is I don't know that I realized as much as I do today how much networking and relationships really mean to your life. And they're going to mean that no matter what you do in life. But I really underestimated at 20 the value of the people in the room so look to your left and your right now, because I'm going to tell you, you don't know that the people you're sitting in this class with may actually be the people that you are either depending on a career for in the future. I go back and share with you that when I was in college, one of the people that was in college with me has just retired last year as the worldwide CFO of the Coca-Cola Company. And I realized, Eli, that while we were students, right, and we knew each other, needless to say, neither one of us ever would have dreamed, right, we would become him the CFO and me the vice chair of a $30 billion organization. And so I think the first thing I would say to you is don't underestimate how soon you start needing to build relationships, and that your ability to network and use those relationships and nurture those relationships and take time for them really matters. And that's kind of what I'm trying to teach the Dear Run fellow.
Yeah,
women,
so you talked about your relationship with them and how you've kept in touch. And I'm guessing as busy as you are, that's probably taken a lot of efforts of them continuing to reach out, stay in touch with you. Is that what it looks like?
You know, Eli, I'm glad you asked me that, because it really is like that. But I encourage them to make the first call to me. I think sometimes if you're sitting in this audience and you've had the opportunity to work or mentor or be acquainted with, maybe some of your parents or family friends who say, reach out to me, I'd love to help you. Don't underestimate, they really mean that, but it's your job to make the first call or your job to make the first follow-up. I love these women, quite frankly, now. And occasionally, like in this case, I'm sitting in Raleigh, North Carolina the other day, and I pick up the phone and call India and said, I'm driving back through. I've got to go to Atlanta anyway. We all know how terrible the traffic is in Atlanta anyway. I said, why don't I stop, have dinner with you and David? And obviously she can say no, but I knew and she knew she had rearranged her calendar even though it was that day. So I would tell you, don't underestimate that when people, family, friends, and others say, let me help you, take the initiative as a leader to actually ask them to do that. And if they get you on their calendar pretty quick, you know they really meant it. There are a few people that didn't, but I would tell you no matter how busy they are, they really appreciate that you reached out, asked for advice, and then enjoy getting to know them better.
Yeah, I think some of us kind of get intimidated by the networking kind of label, but as you look back again, can you think of any people that you connected with, made a relationship with, that you're looking now has paid dividends down the road, that maybe when you were 20, 25, et cetera, that people who really mentored you, guided you, or gave you some advice where needed? You
know, it's interesting. One of the first people that I went to work for was actually about 3 or 4 levels higher than where I, not a partner, more like a manager. So when I first started my career, I smile because I realize now our middle son is named after him, and our youngest son he's his godfather. And I remember that if you look in front of you, if you think about where you're sitting today, the people that graduated 2 or 3 years ago, who now are in the roles, I worked for him. And he gave me some really good advice, Eli. One of the things I like to do with students when I talk with you is I like to step back and say, what did I not do very well? In other words, what kind of mistake did I make? Let me just share with you all, in mentoring that he did for me, one of the things I recognized is if you focus on where you are today, you're trying to make the grades, you're trying to get a job, it's all about you. And this manager, his name's Mike, Mike looked at me very early in my career, 21, 22, as I told you, I started at 20. And what I realized was I was being competitive, and I was so competitive that absolutely all I was trying to do is make Karole successful. Now, we all want to be successful, but what I hadn't valued was there was a whole group of people that started with me. There were actually 21 of us that started together at the same time. And he encouraged me to really stop focus on what it was going to take to make me successful and recognize the team around me could help make me successful. It wasn't only about my success, but that I needed to be part of a team and people needed to trust me. And I'll tell you, people didn't like to work with me very much because it was all about Karole. It was all about my stories. It's all about me. And all of a sudden I'm thinking, And thankfully Mike stopped one afternoon and said, hey, come meet me. And we went off someplace. I think we had a beer, probably. And can I say that on this computer? Okay.
You just did.
I just did it. But anyway, we went off and we had a beer. And he looked at me, he said, you don't have to compete with everybody you're working with. Just enjoy what you're doing, learn from what you're doing, and take these lessons and move forward. And it was really helpful, Eli.
Well, Karole, I think that speaks a lot about you and how you, I think so often it's easy to look externally what's going on, but really look intrinsically and say, what can I do? How can I improve and how can I get better? I think that takes a lot of self-awareness and obviously kind of speaks, I think that's been evident throughout your career. But again, so networking and the importance of networking, I think that's something that absolutely every single one of us in this room we hear, but to hear some of those stories sheds a different light on it. You mentioned something to me backstage, though, another thing you wanted to touch on. You talked about kind of enthusiasm and proactivity and the importance of that. What lessons would you have to share with us about that?
You know, it's interesting, Eli. I've, over the years, developed sort of this, one of our core values is to have energy and enthusiasm and proactivity in your career. And as I reflect back, first of all, you can tell pretty quick, I'm definitely an extrovert, right? So I'm always out there. But sometimes I had to step back in my career where you all are and recognize that some of the things that I was going to do, quite frankly, weren't really that enthusiastic. But I found myself over my career, in fact, I was thinking about a story to illustrate this point to you. Very early in my career, it was about 2 years in, I'm a senior. And we're working on the team. I've gotten that feedback. And I'm working with a group of people that include the partner on the account is actually, believe it or not, Eli, the regional managing partner, same job I have today. So I now step back and think, here I was on this team, we were doing something, and they were really working hard. And I realized in that situation that what they were doing, by the way, remember, this is pre-computers, okay? You probably don't recognize that day ever happened, but that really was pre-computers. So everything we did to get a company's financial statements ready had to be done spreadsheets. And I remember they were all working, they'd all gone to a meeting, and I walked back in after they got back, and it was after hours, okay? And I walked in and I volunteered, and I just walked in and said to the partner, who's the regional managing partner at the time, I said, hey, Mr. Scott, we only called him, I told you to call me my first name because I said, we're not going to do that, right? But I said, hey, Mr. Scott, and I volunteered that afternoon to take care of something. And he looked at me, he said, why are you here? And I realized the value of just being there, not worrying about who was going to pay me for it, not worrying about who was going to watch me do it, but the value I was going to gain working with that group of people that night was going to teach me something. There was no way to learn unless you actually just crunched through the numbers. We had these 18-column columnar work papers. We had an adding machine, and we had a pencil, right? And we were going to have to crunch through about what today would be about a $200 million adjustment. Back then, it was about $400,000. It's hard to believe, but this was back in the 80s. And I knew that if I learned how to do that, and it's interesting, that was a time when just volunteering, they knew, one, I'd show up, two, I'd have a great attitude, and three, I wasn't worried about whether or not I was going to get paid overtime to do it. And I'll tell you, Eli, it's been a good example of how to take a lesson in leadership, because you don't always know when things are happening. If you just volunteer to do something, you're going to find you're going to learn. And if you only worry about not the attention about it, but just what am I going to learn from this experience, I think it helps you be a better leader in the future.
Yeah, especially as I think even the inverse of that, you're talking about being proactive, but then also the opposite is passivity, and something a lot of people can so easily fall into. But to really, in that story, Karole, as you talked about how you rejected passivity and did a job that wasn't yours, went out of your way, but then showed enthusiasm in doing it. And as small as that probably was in the grand scheme of your life, it's little things like that add up. Another thing that
You know, Eli, let me add one
Yeah.
more thing before we go on. Are we okay time-wise?
We're fine.
I'm not used to 50 minutes yet. I mean, this is kind of a new, but let me also share with you, I think it's benefited me to be, Mitchell was talking about my community involvement. And I will share with you that a lot of times when you leave college, right, you've had a lot of opportunity here, right? There are activities you're engaged in, things that you want to do. But I saw that as I moved, I had cancer 35 years ago. I'm a survivor of that. And I found when I left college, I really wanted to give back, right? I wanted to be involved in something in the community. Let me encourage you that sometimes that proactivity is going to volunteer, not just to volunteer, but something that you are just passionate about. I was passionate about cancer, right? I had experienced that. I'd gone through some things. It was really important. So I encourage you, as you leave college and they say get involved, especially sometimes you didn't have time to do that. Many of you may have worked all through this or studied, worked, and that was just about all you could do. You know, find whatever you're passionate about and go and get involved in doing that. Just one thing, not 50 things, not 100 things, one thing that you really care about. It may be church, it may be sports, it may, whatever it is, because I think I've built some, back to my first comment about relationships, I've built relationships doing in those environments. And when I think about how my career went from stage to stage to stage, it went there because of people, right? The CFO of Coca-Cola, you know, I would tell you in Atlanta, one of the greatest people that I met happened to be the chairman of the board of a school system that it's a private school system. And we are in the process of transitioning. I will be giving the baton of the regional managing partner to my successor and retiring in several months, at least from this chapter, I'm calling it. I'm going to chapter 2. We'll talk, maybe you'll invite me back to talk about chapter 2 one day. But anyway, but I picked up the phone and called that relationship to help this successor of mine who's moving into Atlanta. And that, think about it, 7 years ago, the relationship, but the proactivity of getting involved in something that he was involved in. Now Sam, my successor's son's got a place in the spot in the school because we built that connection. So don't underestimate the network may just help you help somebody else, but do things that you're passionate about. Don't just volunteer to do something you're not really passionate about.
That's actually really great insight. Those two, building your relationships and fostering those and doing things you're enthusiastic about and passionate about, those aren't mutually exclusive, and those two worlds can collide. Additionally, you had something else you said you wanted to touch on. You talked a little bit about when to say yes and when to say no. I thought you had some great insight on this, and I'd love for you to share that with everybody.
Eli, every leadership talk I've talked about literally for 37 years, there are two more pieces of advice I've always said. So let's go with the first one, then you'll ask me the second one. Thank you for doing that. But the first one is say yes often and no strategically. If you're taking notes, it's relationships, it's energy, enthusiasm, and proactivity. Third is say yes often and no strategically. And what do I mean by that? Let me just share with you one of the experiences I've had that I've really not talked about. And I know that some of you in this audience are in some classes where you talk about. I happened to be the office managing partner when the Health South fraud occurred back in Birmingham. Many of you may not know much about that, but 5 CFOs, 3 of which had formerly worked with our firm, were colluded fraud and actually, you know, had a massive fraud. Thankfully, the company did not go under, but it was really a bad part of history. And I tell a story that I learned a little bit about saying no strategically when the following thing happened. And this is the first time I've ever told this story, so it's really sort of interesting. Health South's been a really tough thing for me to talk about because it was a hard time in my personal career because I'm the office managing partner and Anderson had their experiences, and all of a sudden I'm leading a practice where I don't know if all the people are just going to walk out, right? Or the clients are going to walk away. And I've got to keep the people calm and execute. And about 2 weeks in after when the Health South fraud was discovered, we had a CFO that pled guilty. I got a phone call from the chairman of our firm. And the chairman of our firm says to me, Karole, we want to know where you want to go. And I went, What do you mean, where I want to go? And they said, we want to know where you want to go because we don't know what's going to happen, right? We'd all experienced what had happened to another accounting firm when we'd had the Enron matter. We want you to know that you have a career with the firm, you have turned down some opportunities to move, and we just want to know where you want to go. And I said, I asked him 2 questions. I said, Jim, and by the way, Eli and I just realized he's going to work for Citibank, and Jim's on the board now at Citibank. So I'm looking forward to making your network work for you, Eli.
Thank you very much.
But Jim asked me that afternoon, he said, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what will happen in the office. We don't know how it's going to client. We don't know. I mean, all of that's going to unfold. I said, look, I don't think our people did anything wrong. I said, I know the people that worked on that account, and they didn't do anything wrong. And by the way, the rest of that story, if you followed it, is we were, as a firm, not, we basically were upheld that we didn't do anything wrong. And I knew our people. And so I stood behind him, and he said, we don't know what's going to do. I said, well, first of all, do you need a scapegoat? And I learned a lot about my company at that point in time. He said, no. If our people did what they were supposed to do, we're going to stand behind them. And we did, all the way through. All those people had jobs. All those people had careers. I said, the second thing is, do you think I just don't have enough gray hair? Because I'm 35 years old, I'm running an office, and all of a sudden, to be honest, I'm going to be forced to the situation of wondering, okay, do I move my family at this point and us take on one of these opportunities? And it was interesting. He said, no. He said, but we don't know what's going to happen. And it'll be a future that's not charted really solidly if something happens. And we just want you to know that we care about you, and we want you to be at the firm a long time. And I said, okay, I think I know what I'm going to say, but let me sleep on it. So I slept on it the next day. I got up and I called Jim very early, about 6:15 in the morning. I said, I'm going to say no this time. And he said, what? It'd be so much easier, right, to say yes. I said, no, I'm saying no in my mind strategically. And I said, in the great old words of Mark Twain, you can't run away from trouble. Ain't no place that far. And I realized that what I was going to have happen, Eli, is that I was going to say no to just jumping ship when it might get tough, live through what was going to happen at Health South, and ultimately, hopefully, and you know the rest of the story, right? Here I sit today. I truly believe today I would not have this vice chair position if I hadn't learned. There were just things I learned in the next 365 days because I said no strategically and didn't just run away from the, to have a chance. So I've always told people, say yes when you can, say yes to opportunities, but sometimes say no strategically because guess what? I think I learned more saying no that time to the firm than saying yes.
It's really interesting. I think that's very applicable to a lot of college students is learning when to say yes, how to say no, when it's important to say no. And lastly, you had one thing you're really passionate about that you want to touch on, and I think everybody's going to really enjoy this piece.
Good. How many of you in this audience play cards? Any kind of cards? You can raise your hand. I'm not talking to... Okay, all right. I am passionate about bridge. Any of you in this room play bridge? Okay, all right. I didn't think so. It's a grandmother's thing, okay? But you play poker, you played spades, you played rook, you played queens, you played hearts, you play all those. I have a lesson. I hope that as long as you ever remember Karole Lloyd's name, you'll remember this. If you don't remember anything else I say today, and that is I believe that Karole Lloyd has been successful in her career because she played the hand she was dealt. Okay? What do I mean by that? All right? And every leadership talk I've ever given, it's amazing to me, Eli, 37 years later, it still's true. Think about when you're playing cards, what happens. You shuffle the deck, you play out the cards. In bridge, there's you and a partner. And you play very strategically in bridge. If any of you ever want to learn, call me. I'll teach you how to play. But the reality is in every card game, right, you get to shuffle the deck. It comes to you. You get a set of cards, okay? And you get to play that hand, all right? So my rule of leadership is play the hand you were dealt. And here's why. In cards, in the game, you get to play, then you get to shuffle, then you get to play another game, and hopefully you ultimately win, right? pretty competitive, remember. But this is why I think it's so critical in my life. One of the things that I think I have done well throughout 37 years is I've always played the hand I was dealt. Too many people I watch in their careers worry about the jack of diamonds they don't have in their hand than the 10 of hearts they do. Or worry about the fact that they didn't get dealt the ace of spades for spades. They only got dealt the queen of diamonds. What I've done in my career that I think has been very successful is every situation, Eli, that I had, no matter what it was, no matter what the situation was, I took the things that I had, the cards that were in my hand, the things that might have happened, the Health South situation, and I didn't worry about the things I couldn't change. Some people have heard the accept the things I cannot change, courage, grant me the wisdom to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. It's the same thing here. The reality is playing the hand I was dealt has been hugely successful because, quite frankly, a couple of things happened. Number one, I would play with whatever I had. I got the facts. By the way, I'd make a decision. One of the things that's very different about me and my predecessor is my predecessor would marinate on a decision. It drove the people that worked with him. He's a fabulous individual, but he would marinate. He would even say marinate on a decision. I am going to make a decision. I may make the wrong one, but I'm going to do it with all the information, the hand that I've got, those cards that are in my hand. I'm going to play with what I know. Then we're going to shuffle them. And if I made a mistake, I'm going to try to do it differently when I get the next hand. So I would tell you, Eli, it's been a great rule for me to play the hand I'm dealt. Don't worry about the things that you cannot change. Don't worry about the ace of spades if you didn't get it. Play with the group of people or the facts or the tools or the technology. Don't complain. Don't complain.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can share with you good things happen.
Well, Karole, I would. I think we'd be missing out if I would love for you to think. Is there a time that you can think of in your life where you maybe didn't get dealt the best hand that you could share with us of how you analyzed that, got the information, took it down, and then played that hand you were dealt?
Absolutely. You know, about the time I'd been out of my career for 5 years. So if you think about where you are today. I hadn't even made my 30s, 20 to 25-ish. In our vernacular, for those of you who are in the profession of accounting, I was probably at the very manager state. So I'm sort of really core into the practice. And I really wanted to be on the best account in the office. I absolutely wanted to be on the best account in the office. That is everybody wants that, right? You want the best account in the office or the best client or the best project or whatever. And the managing partner calls me in and says, we got a new job. And I'm thinking, okay, this is great. I'm going to be on the best account in the office. And he looks at me and he says, we want you to take your talents in project management, and we would like for you to be responsible for scheduling everybody in the office. Now, if anybody knows what that job is the hardest job in the office. You have to learn all the people. You have to learn all the clients. And I'm sitting there, Eli. I tried really hard not to look disappointed. But I actually walked out, walked down the hall, walked in the bathroom, and cried. Okay? I always cry in the bathroom, by the way. Those women, I try really hard not to cry in front of men. But I did. I walked down, and I remember thinking to myself, you know what? I got to go do a good job on this. And then I remembered some advice one of our partners who is retired today, who actually said to me one time, he said, Karole, go do a good job of whatever the firm asks you to do. Guess what happens? If you do a good job, one of two things is going to happen. The firm's going to notice, and you're going to get a chance to do something else you want to do. Or if you are bored, or quite frankly, after 2 years of being the scheduler, I must admit it was a bit challenging. He said, you will have earned the right to walk in, raise your hands, be proactive, and do something else. I didn't have to wait. They actually found something for me. But I can tell you, Eli, I was disappointed, and I never let anybody know. I just tried to do the best job I could. there were days, by the way, I would go home and my husband would laugh. He said to me one time, he said, "You can come home and never go back to EY, okay? Or you can come home and not complain about scheduling." But you can no longer come home and complain about scheduling. So guess what? I went back to EY and quit complaining at home. So.
That's great. I think it's awesome for us all to hear about the power of networking and building those relationships. Again, you touched on enthusiasm and being proactive, when to say yes and when to say no, and then especially that playing the hand you're dealt. We've got a couple minutes left as we wrap up. Anything you want to leave us with, I know those are pretty four heavy things. So,
well, let me do this. I had the pleasure of doing the podcast a few moments ago, and they asked me a great question that I want to share the answer that I gave them, because the question was from Caleb Stevens and Caroline Lee. The question they asked me was, something about the fact of, how do you find out, how do you deal with understanding whether or not some company that you may be considering working for, or how the leadership is really going to be the environment that you want to be? I think that was the question for those of you who were part of that. And the answer I gave them is this. Let me encourage you, because I think everybody in here is in Terry, right? Everybody's in Terry. So everybody's somewhat following economics, markets, finance, accounting, statistics. I've left somebody else. MIS. I got it, okay? I don't know. There are 44 graduating opportunities. I got it. But anyway, wherever you're going in business, get ready for your interview by getting ready for asking a few questions, all right? And one of the first two questions people love to answer. So it doesn't matter whether it's a public company, and you should have already been on their website to figure this out, what are their core values, or a private company, because private companies ask the company what their culture is. If you don't already know it from the website, go ahead and get prepared, do your homework, figure out what the core culture is. We at EY believe our core culture is all about teaming. It's not about individualism. You win at our place because you team well together. So my encouragement to you is, and I thought it was a great question, figure out what the culture of the organization is and ask a question of whoever's interviewing you, what's the core culture, so that you can understand if you're going to fit in or not.
That's great. That's a great piece of advice for you to leave us with. I do believe we have something to leave you with.
Oh my gosh.
Well, on behalf of the Institute for Leadership Advancement and Terry Leadership Speaker Series, we'd like to thank Ms. Karole Lloyd for coming today. And we have this.
Oh wow, cool.
Here's the gift.
I can take my red and white scarf now. I can.
You can take it.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very much.
Well, let's all give Karole one last round of applause and thank you for coming. Thank you.